I'm really pleased to see you all here today. Thanks for giving up your time to come and help us celebrate what's a great day for the George Mason Centre for the Natural Environment. I really want to acknowledge the help I've received from the advisory group that we've established to help us identify our projects. The work that we've been doing here has been supported by George Mason. I really want to acknowledge the contribution and the friendship he's offered to Auckland University over the years. He's been a tremendous supporter for us and for our students. And as well as supporting the George Mason Centre for the Natural Environment, he has for a long time supported a number of postgraduate students across the Faculty of Science. Our centre is really focused on interdisciplinary, collaborative research. It's very outward looking, so it's not just focusing on what we as individuals can do within our departments, within our faculty, but it's extending across the university and to wherever is appropriate for us to do the right kind of research that will allow us to affect change. We funded 3 big projects and we're going to hear a little bit about those today.
It's my very great pleasure to reiterate Simon's welcome to this celebration of projects funded by the George Mason Centre for the Natural Environment. Today's hard environmental problems, such as climate change, as Simon said, over-exploitation of resources, water, soil and oil quality and food security, are all complex and overlapping and multidimensional and require multidisciplinary approaches to understand them and then integrative solutions to actually fix them. We've since extended that vision to the faculty's new research strategy, which is also strongly thematic and multidisciplinary, with the George Mason Centre being a strong exemplar of how we want that to unfold in the other thematic disciplines that we have in our strategy. We're extremely grateful that George and his charitable trust colleagues shared our vision and supported the establishment of the centre through the most marvellous donation of $5 million.
So I'm Kevin Simon, I'm in the School of Environment, and I'm part of a team that's trying to tackle the issue of microplastic pollution. And so you've probably seen in the news, it's sort of a major concern that's been growing, this sort of recognition of the massive amounts of plastic that we're pumping into the environment and the potential consequences. We have really 2 main thrusts that we're looking at. Gavin is leading a PhD student that's really focusing on the microbes on this plastic that we find, the pollution and that we see out in the environment. And there are 2 reasons for it. One is a key focus on trying to identify which microbes degrade that plastic. And so can we identify which microbes are likely to be able to accelerate the degradation of that plastic, and can we harness that in a way to try and use it as a tool to get rid of that plastic and promote that process. The other aspect of it is focusing on looking at the microbes that are on that plastic using molecular biology to see if the communities of microbes that are on them reflect the pollutants that are on that plastic. The rest of us on the team are focusing on trying to understand essentially what plastic is out there, where it's coming from and where it's going. And so we're leveraging a student that did a bunch of work in streams in Auckland that documented really huge amounts of microplastic pollution in our streams, as much as you see in other rivers across the planet, and it's a huge diversity of material. Our eventual goal is to try to build some models that can predict where plastic's coming from and where it's going to, so we can identify the places that we have to get to try to manage where it's coming from, and then focus on the key areas where the plastic that's really the problem plastic is surfacing in the environment, so we can deal with those sorts of areas.
Beaches unsafe to swim, landslides, erosion, deterioration of the Hauraki Gulf. Every week we're facing the news. More extreme storm events, as we had a few over the past couple of weeks. So what can we do about it? Systems are linked. Water is an example, a perfect example for it. Still, so far, we have been looking at fresh water, we have been looking at marine systems. Now, one of the major aims of this project is to really work together, so from the hilltop to the ocean. So, the details which we try to emphasize on are, from the landward side, how is organic matter transported towards the streams? How is it transformed? What are the feedbacks with greenhouse gas emissions? can we do something about it to minimize greenhouse gas emissions, for example, of waterways? Also the capacity of coastal ecosystems, when we're talking about kelp forests, when we're talking about seagrass, they have huge capacity to help us mitigate some of the aspects which we're creating with our activities. So the overall aim is to link those different elements, to quantify the capacity of natural systems, but also look into restoration mechanisms which could help us to mitigate some of the effects which we're seeing. Thank you.
Fortunately, we are in a democratic society, but unfortunately, democratic societies are not always the best informed, and therefore we end up with policies and we end up with citizenships that are disengaged from the things that they cannot see and understand. And also about how people learn. Like, how can we articulate these complex systems in a world where, as Simon described, mass media, which happens to be where most people get their science, is so simplistic. It tells stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there'll be controlled experiments with different types of media to see how we can get people interested, understanding these complex systems, and engaged in some kind of meaningful way. And once we're done with that, we are going to be holding workshops with other people who are engaged in these questions, and then disseminate this material to the journalists, to the policymakers. So thank you so much.